The first reason is an abundance of jobs. Industrialization and factories created millions of low-skilled jobs. The uneducated poor could easily find work for a living wage. The next reason is cheap housing. As cities grew, apartments and tenements were built to accommodate cities. Rents were cheap, rooms were abundant, but living space was cramped.
As industrialization and innovations in farming spread quickly throughout the country, plows, reapers, and powered tools cut the need for hired hands on farms and plantations in the South. Without work, former low-skilled field hands moved to northern cities in search of factory jobs. New urban problems developed. One such problem was water. Many American cities lacked adequate water mains, indoor plumbing, and piped drinking water. Residents found it hard to bathe or sanitize against disease. There was no running water for waste disposal, and drinking water was usually full of bacteria. Another problem was sanitation. More people in the cities densely packed means more trash and more waste. It was common to see horse and human waste flowing in gutters and streets. Poisonous smoke filled the air from factories, making it harmful to breathe. Poor ventilation, sanitation, lighting, and waste disposal led to vermin, disease, and stench. It was not uncommon to find multiple families living in one room. Crime also became a terrible problem in the crowded urban city. Overcrowding, naive immigrants, and inadequate police force led to issues with crime. The era of urbanization during the Gilded Age gave birth to one of America's greatest marvels, the urban city. Made possible by steel, electricity, a booming urban population, and the ideas of great individuals, the American megacity rose like a monument to American success. As cities and populations boomed, new political structures fought over power. Local governments began to grow more and more inefficient. Politicians sought to manipulate voters and gain power for themselves. This leads to the urban political machine. The political machine was an organized group of political officials who controlled activities of a political party within a city. Think of a clubhouse or a fraternity in politics. With migration and urbanization, political parties sought to take advantage of chaos to control political office. They would accomplish this goal by manipulating voters. Officials of the political machine gave favors and perks to voters and businesses in return for support at the ballot box. The idea was you get my back and I'll get yours.
The structure of the political machine was set up like a pyramid. At the top, we have the city boss. The city boss controlled most local services and chose candidates to elect. Often, the city boss was the most powerful man in the city. Next, in the middle, we have ward bosses. Ward bosses gave local favors and ensured precinct votes were secured. The ward bosses reported to the city boss and delivered on promises that were given to the voters. And finally, at the bottom, we have block captains and precinct workers. These members rounded up voters in neighborhoods and city blocks. They escorted voters to the ballot box in order to make sure they voted the way they wanted them to. Political machines preyed on newly arrived immigrants and struggling businesses the most. They took advantage of culture shock, promised housing, jobs, and quick naturalization for worried new immigrants. They hired second-generation immigrants to speak to newly arriving immigrants in their native language.
Why start a political machine in the first place? The answer is graft. Graft is the illegal use of political power for personal gain. Here's how it worked. Machines would get monetary kickbacks for employment. They would have workers overbill cities for jobs done, like building bridges, public transportation, streets, and buildings, and then skim the extra money off the top and pocket it for themselves. They controlled the police department so that the cops would look the other way. In order to keep power, political machines grew desperate. They would commit voter fraud when enough votes couldn't be bought. This included having voters vote multiple times in an election. It also included using fake names and late-night trips to the cemetery, where the names of dead people would be taken off tombstones and put onto registered voters' lists, where they would vote for the political machine's candidate.
There was a lot of corruption surrounding political machines, but they still provided many benefits for cities and their residents. Immigrants were able to rely on them for jobs, emergency aid, and public services. The machines created public work projects, such as building public parks, paving streets, providing better transportation and sanitation, and overall improving the standards of living.